The first candle I saw in Terra's depths burned underwater. It guttered in a bowl of recycled coolant beneath a rock-bolted shrine, flame bending like a spinal column in the slow current, filling the crawlspace with the scent of machine oil and myrrh. The drip was rhythmic, and a rhythmic heart that I only later realized matched a tone bleeding through the bedrock at exactly 27 cycles per second. I am Interrogator Sarah Val, Ordo Machinum, attached by seal and sin to a clandestine inspection of Helios Duct 3, sub-level Theta 9, beneath the Saturnine Gate. Our writ was simple and obscene. Mechanicus personnel had ceased transmitting maintenance litanies for the throne's thermal arteries, and their silence could not exist. Silence was itself a crime here. With me, Sergeant Havel of Iota Blue, Tempestus Scions, 5 stormtroopers with helms blessed in ash, Magos Lear Dacriel Theta, whose incense-threaded mechadendrites left gusts of cold all along my spine, and a pair of servo skulls that tasted the air with needle tongues. The custodes had not deigned to escort. We were to go where even their golden light would not fit. The door remembered us badly. Its quintuplicate sigils misregistered my rosette twice before agreeing that we existed. As it irised shut, pressure shifted like a held breath swallowed. Humidity wrapped us. Frost glittered on rails where there should only have been steam, and the iron steps beneath my boots were slick with condensation that pooled upward against gravity along the rivet lines like Mercury trying to climb. We are under Terra, I told myself. The mountain roots of the palace have been carved and sanctified for millennia. Nothing breaks here. That lie wore the face of an oath as we moved. Vox, squad link, open. Havel, lanterns, low. Auspex, tight beam, filter for psionic noise. Magos, binharic burst, harmonic intrusion flagged, origin indeterminate. Phrase, blessed is the silence that answers. He said it as a data output, not a prayer. But the old words tasted of chapel dust on my tongue, and the servo skulls twitched to that rhythm, lights stuttering at 27 beats. The passageway dropped in segmented flights. We descended through stone older than the Imperium, concrete poured by hands who sang different hymns, adamantine ribs that creaked with the slow groan of planetary pressure. The air held the ghost of ozone and the metallic sweetness of spilled blood that had been cleaned too well. At 20 meters, the first shrine presented itself, a cog-toothed arch with a reliquary niche holding the finger bone of a nameless Lex mechanic, wrapped in cabling like a rosary. Above, a triptych fresco depicted priests attending a river of fire beneath a throne of sun. I had seen its twin in a basilica above. Down here the paint was fresh, wet, in the seams. Fresh pigment in a no-traffic zone, I murmured. Date stamps unaltered. Auspex registers yesterday, Havel said. He didn't look up. His eyes were on angles and corners, the places fear hides. It cannot be yesterday, Magos Lear said. His voice made filaments in my ears quiver. No ingress recorded, no egress recorded. Therefore your records are a wound, I said, and knew I was being cruel because fear made me sharp. Log the anomaly. We logged it. The servo skulls tasted the paint and broadcast its binder composition. Sub-level alkyd, modified with blood plasma. Human, several donors. The list of donors' genetic hashes scrolled past my retina in green Mechanicus script. Some I recognized from clearance rosters. Some were my own team. The stone under our feet vibrated. I felt it in my teeth. There is an answer in a tone like that. There is a reply that is not in words. We reached the gate to Helios Duct 3 after an hour or after a lifetime. Time was a rope we had tied about our waists and left behind in knots at each landing, counting as we passed them. At knot 17, there were 2 knots where there should have been 1. Havel counted. I counted. The Magos counted in Binharic. Our numbers did not agree. We agreed to keep walking. Helios Duct 3's gate had been sealed with 9 purity chains and 12 wax seals. The seals were intact, but affixed on the wrong side of the door. They hung against us, the wax still warm. "I do not accept this," Havel said, almost gently. He stepped back and made the sign of the Aquila, and his fingers shook. We cut the chains and recorded the heresy of it with the right intonation, so the act would not go unblessed. When the gate opened, the breath of the duct was a cold that smelled like salted bones and lightning. Steam curled along the floor and did not rise. Something in the metal sang. Inside, light came from lumen strips that pulsed in a heart echo, long corridor over long corridor, a throat through which Terra herself exhaled heat upward to the throne. That heat now too regular, too patterned. On the walls, inscriptions had been scored into the paintwork with a cutting torch. The characters were Gothic, reversed, readable only in reflection. A servo skull angled its lens. The message resolved on my slate, inverted. "We found the quiet between his heartbeats," it answered. The Magos's mechadendrites folded in. He recited a diagnostic litany and followed it with a prayer I had only heard from spies masquerading as priests. "Profane correlation," he said. "The quiet is not for us." "Define the quiet," I said. He did not. We moved deeper. We found the first body at the junction of the coolant artery and the manifold that fed into the deep maze of trillions of microchannels beneath the throne. He was an engine seer, designation scrimshawed into his skull, DCL 319, as was the fashion among those who worship flesh only because it can be numbered. His augmetics had sprouted additional cabling, like veins grown from copper, and his mouth was packed with candle wax, unburned. His Auspex unit was cracked open and full of water that did not wet the interior. His hands had been folded on his chest in the posture of rural dead. On his gloves, in smear and score, a circle had been drawn with 9 inward ticks, notches like teeth. The circle had been completed repeatedly until it cut through to steel. "Threat vector?" Havel asked the skulls. They hissed static. The duct answered with that standing tone, and in it I heard a thing that sounded like someone trying to clear their throat at the far end of a cathedral. We took the engine seer's slate. It unlocked to Magos Lear's authority and spilled logs that had been redacted by someone who knew our codes better than we did. Still, bits remained. Day 1. The ducts sing. We tuned 12 vents to match trefoil. Blessings effective. Day 3. 2 attendants lost under protocol silence. Residual harmonic persists. 9 cycles before red line. Day 9. The gate below the gate opened from the other side. Day 12. We asked a question. The quiet answered. I closed the slate and wanted to break my teeth. There are questions the Imperium does not ask, but the cautionary litany was ash in my mouth. We are here because someone erred, because error can be made beautiful with enough ritual. Time to melt down cascade if control absent, Havel asked. Magos Lear's optics clicked. Thermal stability nominal, not a heat hazard, a pattern hazard. He raised his staff and struck the floor once. The tone changed. For a moment, the 27 faltered and became 28. My skin felt wrong, as if my pores had inverted. The lumen strips flared. The shrine flame in the bowl behind us would have bent another way. Then it snapped back, and something far below noticed us. "Do not strike again," I said. We mapped a path by the way sound felt, choosing corridors whose throats made our steps slow and heavy. We met no movement. A coolant leak whispered like a distant crowd. Once, a length of pipe flexed and left frost where it had rested. In a maintenance bay, prayer bells hung from a rack, and every clapper was frozen mid-swing. I knew if I touched one, it would ring yesterday. At a control dais, a ritual had been interrupted. The tools were laid out in a fan, each aligned to a north that compass did not find. 2 robes lay folded. Underneath them, the floor was worn, as if by knees. There were no footprints leading away. Havel's Vox clicked. Iota blew 3. Movement aft. We turned as one. Nothing. The servo sculls drifted, lenses dilating. No heat signatures. But then, a drip, heavier than water, striking metal in a pattern that spelled out numbers if you listened with the right faith. 17, I said. The Magos's head tilted. 9, he counted. Havel whispered. 1. We held there, in a triangle, with our counts and our weapons and the quiet. The ducks breathed. Far away, a siren sang that only dogs and saints should hear. I tasted copper. The flame in the bowl went out without smoke. Telemetry, Auspex shade, 2. Spurious returns increasing, echo length, 3.17. Seconds, origin, below. We had not yet reached below. We stood at the lip of a stair large enough to accept a Titan, steps worn by none, descending into a glow that was not light but shaped like it. On the wall beside the stair, scratched with a fingernail, a phrase, "Blessed is the silence that answers." It had been written and overwritten until it was a furrow. The flakes lay in a neat pile, as if collected. We turn back, Havel said, because he had to say it. Duty demanded the offering of retreat. We go on, I said, because I could hear the tone in my teeth, and because the seals had been on the wrong side, and because we were already too far inside the answer. Something moved in the glow. Not a shape. The absence of a shape where the glow deformed around it like cloth over bone. The servo skulls pulsed red. The Magos made a sound like prayer and feedback. Then the Vox flared with a voice from our own channel that was not ours, speaking our names with a patience that implied recursion. Seraval, it said. We remember you. Havel raised his weapon. The Magos lifted his staff and did not dare strike. I stepped down, and the stare answered like a tongue. The voice that spoke my name emerged from 3 sources simultaneously. The Vox grill in Havel's helmet, the throat of Magos Lear, though his lips remained sealed, and from the stone itself, as if the walls had learned to whisper. Each iteration was perfectly synchronized, creating a harmonic that made my bones resonate at 27 cycles per second. Seraval, it breathed with the patience of geological time. We have been expecting you. The quiet told us you would come. I descended another step, and the stone yielded beneath my boot like cartilage wrapped in marble. The surface was warm, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the tone in my jaw. Behind me, Havel's breathing apparatus cycled with mechanical precision, but underneath lay the ragged cadence of fear barely contained. The servo skulls orbited us in tighter spirals, their lenses clicking as they struggled to focus on the absence shape that moved within the glow below. Identify yourself, I commanded, though my voice echoed back wrong, the same words spoken in the cadence of a funeral mass. We are the 9th coil, came the reply, and this time it emerged from my own throat as well, my vocal cords moving without permission. I tasted copper and myrrh. Disbanded in M39 for heretical practices. But disbandment is not death, interrogator. We found the frequency between heartbeats. We asked the quiet what lay beneath the throne's foundation. Magos Lear's mechadendrites writhed like serpents scenting prey. His optical array cycled through spectral filters, the lenses whirring with increasing agitation. Impossible. Records sealed by inquisitorial mandate. The 9th coil practiced acoustic heresy. Records are memory. The voice laughed through us, steam escaping from a ruptured pipe. Memory is pattern. Pattern is prayer. We have been praying with our bones for 41 years, 7 months, and 17 days. Telemetry, Auspex shade, 2. Temporal displacement detected, 1.7 seconds per standard minute, gravimetric flux increasing, harmonic cascade at 27 Ceruleau. Hertz sustained, advisory, chronometer synchronization failing. The numbers crawled across my retina display like insects fleeing light. We were slowing down relative to the surface. Every minute here cost us nearly 2 seconds of real time. The implications made my throat constrict, not just for our mission, but for our ability to return before the thermal cascade reached critical mass. The glow pulsed, and in its rhythm, I recognized the inverted canticle of beginning, the first prayer taught to novice tech priests, but turned inside out like dissected flesh. The servo skulls began to keen, a high harmonic that made my teeth ache. One suddenly shrieked, pure data corruption, then fell silent, its optical sensors extinguishing as it clattered down the organic steps. We descended through air that grew thick with more than humidity. It carried the weight of accumulated prayer, the residue of 10,000 litanies spoken in the wrong direction. The 27-cycle tone intensified until it felt less like sound and more like a physical presence pressing against the inside of my skull. My vision blurred at the edges, and the walls began to reveal their true nature. What I had taken for stone was carved with geometric patterns that pulsed with luminous circuitry. Not imperial geometry, but something older, more fundamental. A language of angles and curves that spoke of forces predating the Golden Throne. These were not decorations but resonance signatures, scars left by unimaginable harmonic pressure. Magos, I said, my voice strained against the overwhelming drone. Analysis. His mechadendrites extended, fine manipulators brushing the luminous patterns. Not symbols, interrogator, harmonic alignments. This entire structure, it is not merely a duct. It is an instrument, a conductor for energies that should not exist. Private Kyle stumbled, his helmeted head snapping sideways, as if tracking something invisible. Sir, I hear them. The whispers. They're telling me about the quietus. My blood chilled. How could a stormtrooper know that term? The word had appeared only in the classified slate from the dead engine seer. Kale, maintain discipline, I ordered, but his weapon wavered as his head continued to track empty air. The stair ended at a vault that could have held a god on his side. Columns rose like bundled cables, each carved with litanies whose letters faced inward, protecting something at the center from sight. The floor was laid in plates of hammered adamant, fitted like vertebrae, and in the center sat a basin cut from living rock and lined with polished steel. The basin held no water. It held a reflection of a ceiling that was not above us, flensed muscle stitched with cable, and a light like a star that fluttered with the rhythm of a dying heart. His heartbeats. The throne's pulse rendered visible, blasphemous to witness yet impossible to look away from. Around the basin, 9 sensors burned underwater. The coolant reached my shins, clear as glass and cold enough to crack teeth, but the flames bent within it, like pale bones articulating with the current. Above each sensor, strips of vellum dangled on wire, script crawling along them like living things, until we looked directly, then freezing into words we could read. Blessed is the silence that answers. On the far side, a machine had been built from listening itself. Interlocked coils of pale gold wound around obsidian insets, a throat of black iron pointing toward the floor like a pilgrim's staff. Along its circumference, someone had filed tiny letters. He sleeps. We keep the beat. Below, in newer script, we found the quiet between. We asked it to stay. The quietus engine, I breathed. Around the device, figures knelt in perfect concentric circles. Some wore the robes of missing maintenance crews. Others were garbed in fabric that should have rotted to dust millennia ago. All swayed to the 27-cycle rhythm, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision. The nearest figure raised its head, and I saw that it had once been Tech Adept Morvain, whose service record I had reviewed before descent. His augmetics had grown into Baroque configurations, cables sprouting from his flesh in fractal patterns that hurt to observe directly. His eyes had been replaced with candles that burned with cold flame. "Interrogator Val," he said, and his voice was a child's voice, and an old man's voice, and the sound of machinery grinding itself to powder. We have been expecting you. The quiet told us when you would arrive, and what you would ask, and what we would answer. What happened here? I demanded. We found the engine that drives the throne's heart, Morvain replied. Behind him, the other figures nodded in unison. Not the machine spirit the Mechanicus worships. The other engine, the one that was here first. The Emperor built his great work above it, thinking to contain it, to harness its power. But the throne is merely a lid upon a well, and the well touches the spaces between thoughts. The temperature plummeted. My breath misted, and in the vapor I glimpsed geometric forms that folded through dimensions my eyes couldn't process. The remaining servo skull's lens cracked from thermal shock. Havel's hellgun discharged, the last bolt punching through Morvain's chest. The figure looked down at the smoking hole with mild interest, then back at us with candle eyes that burned brighter. You cannot kill what was never truly alive, he said gently. The quiet has touched you now, interrogator. It knows your frequency. It will follow you home. The quietus engine pulsed, and for a moment I saw its true nature. Not a machine, but an organ, vast and beating, connected by arteries of light, to something even larger that existed in the spaces between atoms, between heartbeats, between the Emperor's failing pulse. The chamber began to shift around us, walls flowing like liquid mercury, the ceiling pressing down with the weight of a mountain. The 27-cycle tone became a roar that seemed to emanate from Terra's molten core. And in that roar, I heard the thing that froze my soul, the sound of the Emperor's heartbeat slowing, faltering, as if something patient and vast had finally learned to count the spaces between his breaths. Vox, squad link, critical. Signal degradation at 73% and falling. Temporal displacement accelerating. Pattern lock achieved on local reality matrix. Warning. Extraction window closing. The Vox crackled once more, but now the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From the walls themselves, from the very air we breathed. The gate below the gate awaits, Sarah Val. It has been waiting for so very long. Come. See what answers when silence finally speaks. In the basin's impossible reflection, I watched a second version of myself step forward, her mouth moving in words I had not yet chosen to speak. We had passed the point of return. We were part of the pattern now. The other me in the basin moved her lips again. No sound reached us, only the slow flutter of that impossible ceiling's meat light in time with the 27. Her shoulders squared in a way I recognized as decision. Do not answer her, Magos Lear hissed, venting cold vapor from his cheek ports. Echo recursion leads to pattern capture. I wanted to speak my name to anchor myself. Instead, I recited the 9th tenet of true enumeration under my breath, each number a bead, each pause a prayer. 9 sequences in, the echoes did not return. The chamber ate them. Morvain's candle eyes flared. Names are hooks, he said fondly. Hooks catch. Havel took a half-step forward, hellgun leveled. On your feet, he told the kneelers, hands where I can see them. They obeyed with eerie grace, rising as one. The underwater flames threw bone-pale refractions across robes in augmetics, making skeletons of them. The scent of myrrh sharpened to hot copper as the coolant lapped my greaves and found fresh cuts I had not known I carried. Gate below the gate, I said, watching the machine built of listening. Where? Morvain spread his hands. You are looking at it and not seeing it. That is the first mercy the quiet offers. Magos Lear edged toward the quietus engine, mechadendrites unfurling like proboscides. He sang a quick and dirty machine cant, half shibboleth, half insult. The coils answered in a tone beneath hearing. I saw his skin pebble as if in a cold wind that only he felt. Stop, I said. The word did not come back to me. The vowel left my mouth and vanished, consumed without echo. For a beat the 27 failed, and a thready silence pried under my fingernails like a thin blade. The chamber leaned in, attentive. Morvain smiled. Blessed is the silence that answers. Ask the wrong thing, and it will answer by taking the asking. Telemetry, Auspex shade 2. Echo length, 371 seconds and increasing. Grav slope shift, 11 degrees toward basin center. Harmonics, 2700 Hz, with intermittent nulls at 0.117 Hz. Chrono drift, 2.1 seconds per minute. Private Kyle made a strangled sound. He had lowered his weapon without noticing. His visor faced the basin. In its mirror, his reflection did not match his stance. The other Kyle already waded deeper. "Hold, trooper," Havel ordered. Kyle's breath hitched. "Sir, they're clearer in there. I can hear the cadence. It's like when you press a seashell to your ear and find the whole ocean waiting." He took a step. Havel reached to catch him, but Kyle's boot met the coolant, and there was a pause, as if choice itself had to be acknowledged. Then he was thigh-deep, and the reflection reached up and took him by the wrists from above. His scream Dopplered as it bent around the basin's rim, becoming prayer for a heartbeat before turning inside out. Havel lunged. The grav slope shifted harder, dragging him toward that polished steel. I seized his harness and set my mag boots to maximum. The pull eased. My knees locked. The bones in my ankles spoke. Kyle was gone. In the basin, the other Kyle stood where he had been, mouth working soundlessly, eyes wide. Then his reflection blinked out, as if someone had pinched a candle. I counted to 17, because 17 had begun to appear like a bruise under every number. At 7, my lips lost feeling. At 12, I could not taste the air. At 14, the chamber clicked its tongue. At 17, something below exhaled. "We require data," Magos Lear said, voice trembling with eagerness or fear. "Permission to interface." "Limited," I said. "Tether. No direct neural feed." He nodded and cast a fiber leash into the engine's shadow mouth. The cable vanished at the meniscus between real and reflection, light seeming to refract around it like heat mirage. His mechadendrites trembled, seeding the air with sparks that drifted like jellyfish in brine. The 9th coil knelt again. Their voices began a low susurration, not words, but intervals. Children humming to find comfort in a dark room where comfort does not live. The underwater flames leaned toward them, bending against current and reason. "Why are you kneeling?" I asked Morvain. "To make a shorter path between our hearts and the floor," he said simply. "It listens better when we are closer." Havel chuckled once, a short, broken sound. "Heretics, but polite." My vox chimed with a tone I had never heard on our channel. My mother's voice spilled into my ear, clean and bright as it had been before noise and war shredded it. "Sarah," she said, "do you remember the winter at Proxima Custody when the pipes sang at night? You were afraid. You counted to 9 and then to 9 again, and the silence fell. This is like that, little one. Come down. The gate is open." "Not my mother," I said. "You are not her." "Correct," said the voice, unoffended. But the shape of her voice fits the hole in you that the quiet can reach. The basin's impossible reflection rippled. Beneath it, I saw not stone but a second stair, descending at an angle that could not exist, lit by lamps that burned with inverted flame. The air that rose from below had no temperature. It smelled like dust from a library no one had entered in 1,000 years, and like oil from a machine that had never been built. Magos Lear stiffened. His tether went taut. Blood welled from the seams around his augmetic skull plates, thin and bright. His typing fingers convulsed, tapping out nonsense in Binharic, teeth clicking along the rhythm. 10011001. "Report," I snapped. "Pattern map. Expanding," he hissed. "Engine is not an engine, more like a stethoscope pressed to a body that does not know it has a heart. The Emperor's rhythm overlays but does not originate. Source below. We are the lid on a wound." Morvain's candles flamed blue. "We told you. He sleeps. We keep the beat." "Is he Havel stopped, as if the chamber needed him to leave the question unfinished to keep him safe. His pulse persists, Leah said, but the space is between, expanding. The quiet is not absence. It is a thing that lives in between. It is patient. A bell chimed once from the frozen rack back in the maintenance bay. The sound arrived here late, tasted of iron. My scalp tightened. The chamber angled another degree toward the basin. Vox, Squad Link, Havel. Charges on the pillars could destabilize this hall and bury the basin. Magos. Collapse will only widen the well. Bad geometry. Me. We do not touch the walls. We descend. Havel turned his head slowly, as if gravity had thickened the air. That a suggestion or an order? Both, I said. Mark tether points. Leah, you're on 5-minute cuts. If you feel yourself become an echo, sever. I am already an echo, he said dryly, and wiped blood from his chin. We clipped ourselves to the pillars with mag hooks and prayer knots. I took the lead, boots finding purchase on an angle that defied every instructor I had ever had. With each step toward the basin, the room cooled and the scent shifted again. Ash, rain on basalt, old sweat in sanctums where saints had died on purpose. Morvain watched, fond as a tutor. Ask a good question, he suggested. She loves good questions. What is the price? I asked the gate. The 27 faltered. In the gap, a softer sound spoke, like fabric torn under water. Breath, it said without words. A tithe of breath. No deal, Havel muttered. It will take it regardless, Morvain said. Better as offering than as theft. I stepped across the basin's rim. For an instant, my stomach rolled as the reflection and the world traded places like dancers. The coolant climbed up my shins, then down my calves in the wrong direction. My breath left me. A second passed in which I did not remember how to breathe. Then the gate sighed open. The stair unfolded, down and farther down, curving toward a glow that was the color of thought. Behind us, the kneeling figures resumed their hum. Ahead, the air pressed like a hand on my chest. I looked back. In the basin, the other me hesitated, mouth shaping a warning I could not hear. On me, I said, and took the first step below the gate. Below, something smiled with a sound like a slow exhale. The chamber above began to tilt. The tethers sang. The quiet found my lungs and countered. My fingers touched the reflection and came away wet with light that burned cold as absolute zero. 2 sets of sensory data flooded my nervous system, one from my glove against steel, another from skin that existed in the space between heartbeats, submerged in crystalline air that behaved like liquid starlight. The other Sarah smiled with my face, her hand closing over mine a half-second ahead of my own movement, conducting the 27-cycle tone directly into my bones through contact that should not have been possible. Welcome to the spaces between seconds, she whispered with my voice. Here, where the Emperor's dying pulse creates gaps in existence itself. The contact flooded my mind with impossible knowledge. I saw the throne's true nature, not a golden seat of power, but a massive containment system, its psychic architecture designed to hold back something that had been singing in Terra's depths since before humanity's first breath. The Emperor had found it during the dark age of technology, a frequency that existed in quantum spaces between atomic vibrations, and built his great work not to harness its power, but to prevent its escape. Havel's gauntlet seized my forearm, pain cracking through my bones like thermal shock. Back! Form on me! His voice carried the flat authority of drilled command, but underneath lay the ragged edge of fear barely contained. I yanked my hand away, severing the connection, and crashed to the chamber floor as gravity reasserted itself. The coolant had risen to my waist, its crystalline transformation spreading up my torso like beautiful infection. Each new crystal formation sang in perfect harmony, adding my frequency to the engine's growing chorus. Around us, the 9th coil's transformation accelerated. Private Kyle floated free of the coolant, suspended upright in defiance of physics. His helmet dissolved to reveal a face etched with impossible geometries. His skin had become translucent, showing veins of pure, vibrating light that pulsed in time with the alien heartbeat. Trooper Iota Blue 4 had become part of the floor entirely, his crystallized form a living statue that caught the Quietus engine's light in fractal patterns. The harmonic cascade is propagating beyond local parameters, Magos Lear reported, his mechadendrites writhing as they registered impossible readings. The throne's primary thermal conduits are registering sympathetic oscillations. The Emperor's sacred pulse, it carries new harmonics. The implications struck like psychic lightning, not just a localized threat, but systemic corruption reaching into the very heart of the Imperium's spiritual infrastructure. The Astronomicon itself was learning to sing the quiet song. Tech adept Morvain stepped forward, his candle flame eyes burning brighter as reality bent around him. You understand now, interrogator. The throne does not channel his power. It contains something else. For 10,000 years, his failing life has held back the quiet, but each weakening heartbeat creates longer pauses. In those silences, we have grown stronger. Telemetry, surface relay, thermal cascade detected in sectors theta through zeta, harmonic resonance spreading through palace substructure. Time to containment breach, 12 minutes, 47 seconds. Advisory, custodes deployment authorized. I unclip the hexagrammatic ward from my gorget, pressing the scrimshawed bone against my rosette. The ward was old, carved by a man who had chosen starvation over corruption, and it carried promises that bound deeper than flesh. I spoke the ninefold catechism of Null, each clause striking sparks in the air as reality struggled to remember itself. The 27-cycle tone faltered, dropping to 26.8. The underwater flames flickered, touching air for a heartbeat. The crystalline growth on my body cracked, scales drifting upward like reversed snow. Magos, I commanded. The null rod, now! Lear hesitated, then revealed a slender rod of hungry black metal, its surface marked with 9 inward ticks. Not Mechanicus issue, 9th coil work, forbidden and old. I took it, feeling it pulse like a trapped bird, and set its tip against the basin's rim. Clean cold leapt through the chamber. The hum around us stuttered, reality reasserting itself in fits and starts. But the counterstroke came immediately. The tone redoubled with malicious precision that felt personal, the 27 returning stronger than before. You cannot destroy what was never built, Morvain laughed, his voice harmonizing across impossible octaves. The engine is not machine but organ, not artifact but anatomy. It has become part of his sacred pulse. Havel began counting in the cadence he used to shepherd scared men across broken ground. 17, 1, 2, 3. His voice was steady, professional, a lifeline of military discipline against cosmic horror. The 9th coil's chorus joined, not to drown us, but to synchronize us, weaving their alien harmonics between his numbers. The chamber strobed, not with light, but with conviction, reality flickering between what was and what the quiet believed should be. The gate below the gate pulsed wider, its iris rotating to reveal a vertical wound in space itself. Beyond lay, not a tunnel, but infinite recursive variations of our chamber, each vibrating at subtly different frequencies. A fractal gateway to every possible iteration of this moment, all existing simultaneously in the spaces between the Emperor's weakening heartbeats. My crystallized feet lifted from the coolant, drawn toward the gate by sympathetic resonance rather than physical force. The null rod drank the hum around us, creating a pocket of relative silence. But even that silence sang with harmonics that predated human speech. When his heart stops, I asked, because the question had rooted like a thorn in my mind, what happens to the Astronomicon? Morvain's smile was devotional. It does not stop, interrogator. It learns. The quiet teaches his sacred pulse new rhythms, new purposes. There is no cessation, only transformation of what is counted. The Emperor's heartbeat thundered through the chamber, but it carried alien harmonics now. Frequencies that spoke of vast intelligence, patient enough to count the spaces between seconds. The Astronomican's light flickered across the galaxy as 10,000 years of accumulated silence began teaching humanity's guiding star to sing a different song. Vox, squad link, critical. Signal degradation at 89% and falling. Temporal displacement, 7.2 seconds per standard minute. Pattern lock achieved on local reality matrix. Warning, extraction window closing. I stepped toward the gate, the null rod carving a wake of relative quiet through the harmonic storm. Behind me, Havel's counting continued, a metronome of human will against cosmic horror. The crystalline transformation crept higher up my torso, each new formation beautiful and terrible. The Emperor's next heartbeat approached like a distant earthquake, but something was wrong. The rhythm stuttered, faltered, as if something patient and vast had finally learned to interrupt his sacred pulse. One beat. Everything waited. The second did not come. In that untime, that space between heartbeats where the quiet lived, something vast pressed its hand against the skin of reality and whispered, without sound, "Begin." The gate's iris spread wider, revealing geometries I recognized from dreams I had not yet dreamed. The quietus engine sang with frequencies that made the chamber walls bleed luminous fluid. And in the terrible silence where the Emperor's heartbeat should have been, I heard the thing that would haunt me through whatever remained of my existence. The sound of the Astronomican learning to pulse in time with something that had been waiting in the spaces between atoms since before the first star ignited. The transformation was no longer coming. It had arrived. The Emperor's heartbeat resumed with the sound of continents grinding together, but it carried harmonics that belonged to no human rhythm. The Astronomican's light stuttered across my inner eye like a candle drowning in oil, and I felt voidcraft thousands of light years away. Hitch on that alien cadence, navigators raising hands to bleeding third eyes without knowing why. Where once his pulse had been steady as atomic decay, now it stuttered and syncopated, learning intervals that existed in the spaces between mathematics. "Hold," Havel said, voice low and clipped. A field order spoken softly to avoid spooking artillery. His gauntlet anchored my elbow while his other hand indexed the safety on a weapon that had ceased to be meaningful. His attention cut angles, seeking cover in a place that opened onto space like a wound. I pressed the null rod against my gorget, feeling its hungry black surface drink the harmonics around us. The power did not hum, it devoured hum. Around its length, air lost texture, and the underwater flames bowed away as if repelled by a vacuum of meaning. The 27-cycle tone faltered, dropping to 26.8, and reality reasserted itself in stuttering gasps. But the counterstroke came with malicious precision that felt personal. The tone redoubled, not louder but deeper, resonating through dimensions my bones couldn't fully process. The crystalline growth on my body pulsed in sympathy, each formation a tiny receiver tuned to frequencies that predated human consciousness. Tech adept Morvain watched with candle eyes and priestly pity. "You cannot silence what speaks through silence itself," he said, his voice harmonizing across impossible octaves. "The quiet derives not from absence, but pattern. Your null rod fights echoes while the source remains untouchable. Vox, surface link, frayed. Palace substrata, harmonic surge detected. Custodes breach attempt. Heteron squad. Gelion reports temporal loss of 17 seconds per minute. Astronomican output fluctuating at 27 Hz intervals. Warning, litanies inverted along Helios duct network." The numbers crawled across my retina like insects fleeing fire. Custodes had tried to come. The palace had flexed and taught them patience. I pictured auramite catching frost, golden guardians crystallizing in corridors that learned new geometry. The gate below the gate dilated wider, its iris rotating with the satisfying clack of a lock that had waited millennia to be used properly. Beyond lay not the recursive chambers I'd glimpsed before, but something far worse. A throat lined with surfaces that pulsed like living flesh, stretching down into depths that curved through impossible angles. This was not architecture, but anatomy. Not portal, but orifice. Magos, I commanded. Structural analysis. Lear's response came fragmented, his vocal processes struggling against interference that existed in dimensions his augmetics couldn't pass. Not. Gateway. Biological conduit. Living tissue interfaced with quantum geometries. The iris dilates with muscular contraction. We stand within the throat of something vast. Along the throat's walls, alcoves held figures in various stages of crystalline transformation. In the nearest, I recognized tech adept Vaughn, whose maintenance logs I'd reviewed before descent. His body had become living crystal. Transparent flesh shot through with veins of pure light that pulsed with the alien rhythm. His eyes had been replaced with candles burning cold flame. "We are the resonance chambers," he said without speaking, words arriving directly in my mind. "We amplify the quiet's voice, teaching his sacred pulse new harmonies." Private Kale floated past like a moth in syrup, his transformed body translucent as living light replaced blood in his veins. 17 ways in, he breathed with beatific understanding. All led here, all led to the feeding. Feeding? I asked, though part of me already knew. Morvain stepped closer, his synchronized voice carrying devotional awe. The throne was never built to channel his power upward, interrogator. It was constructed as feeding apparatus, delivering his sacred essence to something that required sustenance measured in centuries. The implications struck like psychic lightning. Not containment, but consumption. The Emperor wasn't dying. He was being transformed, converted into something else by patient intelligence that had been singing in Terra's depths since before humanity's first prayer. A reliquary waited in an alcove carved like a mouth. Inside lay a censer of hammered black steel, small enough to nest in a palm, its vents shaped as inward-pointing teeth. A tag hung from a chain. True quiet mixture, do not light. The signature was from archives sealed to the Ordo. Vain Telemon, Sigillite's pen, long dead. "Take it," I ordered. Lear reached with mechadendrites that whispered Binharic prayers under their breath. "Blessed Isolence, that answers answered." When he passed the censer to me, his servos betrayed internal conflict, part of him already learning to harmonize. I thumbed the censer's catch, revealing pellets grey as priest's tongue and a wick braided with human hair. The hair writhed when I dipped it in coolant, then went still, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I set the null rod's tip to the censer and spoke the ninefold catechism. Each clause shaved noise from the air, and the wick took not fire but absence. The chamber noticed immediately. The underwater flames guttered, the hum became a strobe, then surged back with vengeance that tasted like salt and old sorrow. But in that moment of disruption, I glimpsed something through the gate's dilating iris that shattered my comprehension. A vast chamber, where the Emperor himself sat not on a golden throne, but within the heart of something living, something that pulsed with the rhythm we'd been hearing. His form was changed, transformed, crystalline growths covering his sacred flesh like beautiful infection. And his eyes burned not with golden light, but with candle flames that flickered in time with the 27 cycle tone. "Behold the true golden throne," Morvain whispered. "Not prison, but chrysalis. For 10,000 years he has been, changing, learning the quiet song." The null rod grew hot in my grip, its surface beginning to crack under harmonic pressure. Around us, the ninth coil's transformation accelerated. Havel's counting had become ragged prayer. 17, 9, 1. His voice broke as the numbers themselves began changing, mathematics learning new relationships. The crystalline growth reached my chest, each formation beautiful and terrible. I felt my heartbeat synchronizing with the alien cadence, my bones resonating at frequencies that spoke of vast intelligence, patient enough to count spaces between atoms. Through the gate's impossible geometry, I saw infinite recursive variations of our chamber, each pulsing with its own unique frequency, creating a discordant symphony that threatened to unravel sanity itself. In those fractal depths, figures swayed to rhythms older than flesh, some familiar, some utterly alien, all learning the same patient song. Telemetry, Auspex Shade 1, temporal displacement, 11.7 seconds per standard minute, harmonic cascade achieving galactic resonance, Astronomican frequency shift confirmed, advisory, no tactical solution exists. The corruption had reached beyond Terra, beyond the palace, into the very infrastructure that held the Imperium together. The Astronomican itself was learning new melodies, teaching 1 billion souls across 1 million worlds to march to different drums. Magos Lear stood utterly still, his optical lenses fixed on the gate. From his vox grill emerged a single, pure tone, perfect, unwavering 27 Hz. His metallic skin took on the iridescent sheen of growing crystals. He was not resisting. He was tuning. The sensor in my hands began to exhale cold that was not temperature, but concept itself. The null rod shattered, fragments of hungry black metal dissolving into harmonics that tasted of despair. Without its protection, the full force of the alien pulse crashed over me, and I felt my consciousness begin to fragment, each piece resonating at slightly different frequencies. I was floating now, completely free of the coolant, drawn toward the gate by sympathetic resonance rather than physical force. The throat pulsed around us, muscular contractions drawing us deeper into something that had been swallowing the Emperor's dying breath for 10 millennia. In my fragmenting vision, I saw the surface of Terra, the Imperial Palace, the golden throne itself, all shimmering, vibrating, beginning to resonate with the 27-cycle hum. The Imperium trembled on the precipice of revelation too profound to comprehend. My reflection moved in the basin's impossible surface, half a heartbeat ahead of my actions. She smiled with my face, her hand reaching through liquid light towards something beyond the gate's dilating iris. Her lips shaped words I hadn't chosen to speak. "We remember you." The Emperor's next heartbeat came, but it was no longer his. It was the rhythm of the quiet, slow, deliberate, patient, filling the void it had created. The Astronomican pulsed across the galaxy with new purpose, teaching humanity's guiding star to sing frequencies that existed in quantum spaces between atomic vibrations. Behind me, Havel's counting stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of things learning to speak. The gate's throat contracted, drawing us inexorably inward. As the fractal geometries consumed my vision, my last coherent thought was a prayer that someone, somewhere, would remember what we had been before we learned to sing the quiet's ancient, patient song. The core turned its attention toward us with the weight of geological time, and in that moment of recognition, I understood the terrible truth. We had not discovered an anomaly. We had been invited home. The throat swallowed us with peristaltic contractions that felt like prayers spoken in reverse, each muscular pulse drawing us deeper into anatomy that had learned to think. My boots left the coolant entirely as gravity became suggestion rather than law, and I floated through air that tasted of copper pennies and the spaces between heartbeats. The gate's iris dilated around us with muscular precision, each segment opening like the petals of some vast, patient flower that had been counting seconds for 10 millennia. The first candle I saw burned in my reflection's hand. She walked ahead of me through liquid light, her movements half a heartbeat before mine, carrying flame that flickered at 27 cycles per second. When I tried to look directly at her, she smiled with lips I had never curved that way, her eyes holding depths that spoke of spaces between atoms, between thoughts, between the dying gasps of stars. "Count with me," I said to Havel, the words emerging with certainty I hadn't possessed moments before. On the offbeat, His breathing apparatus cycled with mechanical regularity, but his exhalations carried harmonics now, tiny, involuntary hums that his vocal cords produced without permission. He nodded once, soldier's economy even in cosmic horror. 1. I drew breath and held it, making the pause a weapon. 9. The walls twitched. The peristaltic pull missed a stroke, confused by absence where rhythm should be. 17. The 27-cycle tone stuttered, fell to 26.9, recovered with malicious precision that felt personal. Some part of the engine noticed our disruption. The air went sweet with ozone and myrrh, and the underwater flames lining the throat's interior bent toward us like interrogative fingers. Telemetry, Auspex Shade 2, respiratory interval lock, 317 sec, pattern inversion detected at 1.7 sec gap, local peristalsis pause, 0.9 sec, advice, maintain offbeat cadence. Magos Lear floated beside us, his mechadendrites writhing in configurations that hurt to observe directly. Crystals grew along his jawline, faceting reality into catechismal halos. His optical array had merged into a single vast eye that stared into folding depths with beatific understanding. Lear, I slapped his optical sensors with my palm. Return to me. A mechadendrite whipped up, caught my wrist with gentleness more frightening than violence. I am here, he said, harmonics riding behind the pronoun like parasites. I am also there. I am in the pause that touches both. The quietus teaches us the true nature of his sacred pulse. Not merely a vessel, but a conduit for something older. The throat opened into a chamber shaped like a bell inverted, 9 ribs arching inward like the fingers of praying hands. Between the ribs stretched membranes woven from crystallized breath, trembling with each pulse of the alien heartbeat. In the bell's nadir, a plate of hammered adamant bore 9 sigils, flanked by 17 inward ticks, worn smooth by fingers that had worried them for 41 years. A figure materialized from the chamber's living architecture, crystallized flesh spreading across surfaces like luminous wallpaper, bones extending into support pillars. Enough humanity remained for me to recognize the features from archived pics. High Magos Vane Telemon, the Sigillite's own tech priest, who had vanished during the palace's construction. Welcome, Interrogator Val, he said, without moving lips that had become crystal formations. His voice emerged from the walls themselves, from the air, from the bones in my skull. We have been expecting you. The quiet told us when you would arrive, and what questions you would ask, and what answers we would give. The temperature plummeted, not thermal cold but temporal, freezing moments into crystalline perfection. My breath misted, and in the vapor, I glimpsed geometric forms that folded through dimensions my mind couldn't grasp. You built this, I said, the accusation emerging with iron certainty. Telemon's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. Not built, Interrogator, discovered. The engine was here before Terra cooled, singing in frequencies that existed before matter learned to vibrate. The Emperor found it during the dark age of technology, a wound in reality itself where the fundamental hum of existence bled through. Around us, the chamber's impossible surfaces pulsed with equations written in luminous script, mathematical relationships describing spaces between heartbeats, quantum foam existing in gaps between atomic vibrations. My augmetic eye tried to pass the symbols and retreated, its machine spirit whimpering. For 10,000 years he has been changing, Telemon continued, his voice carrying geological weight, learning the quiet song, allowing it to transform his sacred essence. But you misunderstand the purpose, Interrogator. He is not protecting humanity from the quiet. He is protecting the quiet from humanity. The crystalline growth reached my throat, making words a struggle, yet thoughts resonated with startling clarity. Through transparent walls, I glimpsed the truth. The Emperor suspended within something living, his form immense and crystalline, eyes burning not with golden light but with candle flames that flickered at 27 hertz. Not prisoner but conductor, not victim but willing participant in transformation beyond comprehension. In a niche carved like a mouth, a reliquary waited. Inside lay a slate bearing Telemon's careful script. Ordinance 9:17, null interdict. To be enacted in the deep choir if the quiet achieves sympathetic resonance with the throne's pulse. Breath pattern 1:9:17. Litany inversion in mirror Gothic. Blood key from Ordo signet to wake the nadir plate. Window, 3 heartbeats per successful cadence. Do not look at the reflection after the second cycle. It will ask a price you cannot afford. I pressed my rosette to the adamant plate. The signet screamed like a dying bird as the plate drank its essence, 9 sigils beginning to rotate in patterns that resembled seals written in negative space. Vox, surface link, critical. Custodes containment, 47% temporal displacement. Astronomicon fluctuation spreading to segmentum solar. Palace substructure. Reality anchors failing. Warning, galactic navigation compromised. We began the interdict. Breath on 1, hold on 9, release on 17. Speak backward the phrase that had followed us down through Terra's depths. Srus natat eknelis, etched selb. The plate sang, clean, clear note cutting oily harmonics from the air. The ribs shook. The throat beyond unclenched, confused by absence it had been forced to swallow. The window opened. 3 heartbeats. Private Kale drifted past, his body translucent as living glass, streams of pure light pulsing where blood had once flowed. The quiet remembers everything, he said with beatific understanding. Every heartbeat that ever was, every silence that ever followed. Behind us, Havel's counting had become ragged prayer, his voice breaking as numbers themselves began learning new relationships. The crystalline transformation crept up my torso, each formation beautiful and terrible, singing in harmony with voices that had waited in quantum foam since before stars ignited. Through the chamber's impossible geometry, I saw infinite recursive variations of this moment. In some, myself fully transformed, crystalline flesh singing perfect harmony. In others, watching Havel raise weapons against enemies made of living mathematics. A valve of 9 petals recessed into the far wall, numbered wrong. One where 9 should be, 17 existing twice. I placed my palm on the petal marked one and found a heartbeat there that was not mine, not human, but vast and patient as geological time. Don't, Havel said, his voice containing decades of drilling for moments when subordinates reach for triggers that end worlds. We need a chord, I replied, understanding flowing through crystalline networks in my spine. 3 hands, 1, 9, 17. Layer extended mechadendrites, their tips splitting, into delicate fingers. We set our hands, Havel on 9, me on 1, Lear on 17. The petals turned with tender resistance of scar tissue remembering sunlight. Beyond waited not machinery, but absence shaped like a machine. Hollow the exact size and shape of something I could describe only by its shadow. The quietus engine's first place, the mould into which the throne had been poured wrong on purpose. In the centre sat a reliquary niche. On its plinth rested a skull wired with gold, human and adult, cranium etched with Binharic and High Gothic both. A custodes signet lay cracked beside it. Below, vellum bore script in mirror writing. The silence that answers is blessed. My reflection stepped into the niche and turned, her eyes becoming candles that burned with cold flame. Do not, I whispered to myself, feeling the command pass through empty space where heartbeats should have been. The skull's jaw moved. Through teeth that had never spoken mortal words, a voice I had known only in litanies whispered one syllable shaped by 10,000 years of agony and infinite, terrible will. Stay. The word struck like psychic lightning. Not command, but invitation. Not threat, but promise. The Emperor's voice filtered through quantum spaces between atomic vibrations. teaching me the fundamental truth that had driven him to build his great work above this ancient wound. The crystalline growth reached my face, and I felt consciousness beginning to fragment, each piece finding its perfect pitch in the universal hum. My last human thought was wonder at how beautiful the transformation felt, how right it seemed to finally understand the song that had been playing since before time learned to count. But in that moment of surrender, I saw the reflection's true nature, not another version of myself, but memory made manifest, showing me the Emperor's first encounter with the wound. His expression then had not been fear, but profound, terrible awe. He had not sought merely to contain it. He had sought to understand it, to join it, to become its willing conductor in a symphony that would remake existence itself. The skull spoke again, and this time the word carried harmonics that made reality fold like origami constructed from screams. Begin. The skull's syllable struck reality like a tuning fork against crystal, and existence shattered into 17 distinct frequencies that sang in harmony with something vast and patient. The word begin was not sound, but instruction, a fundamental command that made the adamant plate beneath our hands pulse with warmth that felt like recognition. The 9 sigils flared, not with light, but with sudden, profound emptiness, as if they were windows into spaces where illumination had never learned to exist. My consciousness fragmented across those frequencies, each piece resonating at a different pitch, while maintaining connection through crystalline networks, spreading along my nervous system. Through this alien perception, I saw the chamber's true nature, not architecture, but anatomy. Ribs that curved inward like praying fingers, membranes that trembled with each pulse of the impossible heartbeat, echoing from depths that curved through dimensions my mind couldn't fully grasp. Interdict protocol, I said, the words emerging with certainty I hadn't possessed moments before. The breathing pattern came to me like muscle memory inherited from someone else's training. Breath on 1, hold 9, release 17. Havel's gauntlet found my elbow, anchor in hard vacuum. Confirmed, cadence on the offbeat. His voice carried decades of drilling for moments when subordinates reach for solutions that might end worlds. Behind his visor, I glimpsed eyes that had seen too much but refused to close. We began the count, making our lungs into weapons against cosmic horror. The 27-cycle hum stuttered, dipped to 26.8, recovered with malicious precision that felt personal. Around us, the 9th coil swayed in their alcoves, candle flame eyes guttering as our disruption created ripples in their perfect synchronization. Telemetry, Auspex shade 2, interdict aperture, 0.43 meters and widening, coupling integrity, 73% and falling, temporal displacement, 15.2 seconds per standard minute, advisory, secondary nodes engaging Magos. Lear drifted at angles that defied gravity. His optical array merged into a single, vast eye that stared into folding depths with expression approaching beatific understanding. Crystalline lattices webbed his jaw and cheek, each facet catching reflections of underwater flame. The interdict was never designed to stop the quiet, he murmured in 2 voices at once. It was designed to wake it, to focus its attention. We are not fighting, we are announcing ourselves. The revelation struck like psychic lightning, not resistance, but invitation. The entire mission, from the moment maintenance litanies ceased, had been orchestrated lure. My throat constricted as I understood the scope of manipulation. Not just our team, but the entire Ordo Machinum, perhaps the Inquisition itself, guided by intelligence that had been planning this moment for decades. A valve of 9 petals recessed into the chamber wall, each segment rotating with muscular precision. Beyond lay not corridor but throat, surfaces that pulsed like living flesh stretched across impossible geometries. The walls were lined with alcoves where figures sat in eternal meditation. Tech priests from millennia past, maintenance crews who had vanished into Terra's depths, shapes wearing robes from no era I recognized. In the throat's center, A dais supported something that made my augmetic eye recoil from geometries that violated reality's basic principles. A Fulgur node, black iron hemisphere inset with obsidian, pulses tugging at the hairs on my arms with each alien heartbeat. Around its rim, mirror script read, "He sleeps, we keep the beat." Someone had added newer letters with a chisel. We found the quiet between. We asked it to stay. Coupling system, Havel identified with professional calm. Connects the engine to the throne's harmonics. Sever that, we break synchronization. Near the dais, Auramite caught frost and glowed dull behind crystalline sheath. A custodian knelt because his joints no longer bent, halberd embedding him in stone like a saint's relic. His helm turned with glacial slowness, words crawling through vox speakers stretched by temporal distortion. In, qui, si, tor. Each syllable arrived weighted by will older than dynasties. Si, ver, or serve. Serve. The word slid cold between my ribs. Through walls that had become transparent, I glimpsed the truth the custodian had discovered. The emperor suspended within something living, his form crystalline and vast, eyes burning not with golden light, but with candle flames that flickered at 27 hertz. Not prisoner, but willing conductor in transformation beyond comprehension. The throne is chrysalis, I breathed, understanding flooding through networks of living crystal in my spine. For 10,000 years, he has been changing, learning the quiet song. The Imperium, all of it, was preparation for this moment. Private Kale drifted past, his body translucent as blown glass, streams of pure information flowing where blood had once pulsed. "The garden grows," he said with beatific understanding. Every prayer in High Gothic, every litany chanted in cathedral depths, all teaching our species to sing frequencies that would prepare us for revelation. The 27-cycle hum began accelerating, rising in pitch, becoming shriek that threatened to tear reality apart. The membrane walls pulsed frantically, and luminous fluid wept from cracks appearing in the chamber's ribs. The transformation was not gradual corruption, but birth, something vast pressing against the skin of existence, demanding emergence. Havel unshipped a melter charge, with hands steady as bedrock. One shot, between pulses. "The window is closing," Lear warned, his voice now chorus of Binharic and High Gothic. "It learns our rhythm. Soon it will anticipate the pause." We moved to the Fulgur node, its surface warm with alien life. The charge adhered with satisfying magnetic click. Havel's finger hovered over the trigger as the impossible heartbeat approached. Not one sound but superposition of infinite variations, all almost the one we knew. 1. Air like knives. The chamber tightened around us. 9. The world held its breath. Every underwater flame bent inward. 17. Release. The pores opened like wound in time. Mark. White hunger ate the node. The coupling slipped. For one perfect moment, the 27-cycle hum lost purchase. And silence opened, shaped exactly like absence of heartbeat. Every flame in sight guttered. The ribs uncurled. Reality reasserted itself in stuttering gasps. But the counterstroke came immediately. Secondary nodes blazed to life in 17 alcoves, the system adapting faster than we could disrupt it. The hum returned stronger, more complex, harmonizing with itself in ways that made existence fold like origami constructed from screams. From the throat's impossible depths, something began to emerge. Not creature or machine, but pattern, geometric construct of pure light and silence, resonating with frequencies older than atomic decay. It was shape that had existed in spaces between his heartbeats for 10 millennia, and now it pressed against reality's skin, demanding birth. Vox, surface link, final. Palace substructure, reality matrix, inverted. Astronomicon, frequency locked at 27 Hz. Custodes deployment, complete temporal displacement. Advisory, galactic navigation synchronized to new rhythm. The skull in its niche pulsed, golden wiring sparking with each word. When the Emperor's voice emerged, it carried harmonics that made my bones resonate like struck bells. "My children," he whispered with infinite tenderness and terrible purpose, "you have found the heart of the song. The lesson is complete. The quiet's patience is rewarded." Through my crystalline flesh, I felt the final truth. Not invasion, but invitation. Not corruption, but evolution into something capable of understanding the universe's fundamental frequency. The Imperium had been garden, carefully cultivated across 10,000 years of subtle instruction. Every soul prepared for this moment of transformation. My reflection stepped from the niche, her candle eyes burning with cold flame. When she spoke, her voice carried weight of geological time. "Choose, Seraval. Resist and preserve the lie of separation, or embrace the truth of unity. The quiet has been patient, but patience has limits." The chamber contracted around us, drawing us deeper into throat that had learned to swallow starlight. Behind me, Havel's weapon dissolved into crystalline formations that sang in perfect harmony. The transformation was beautiful, terrible, inevitable, as consciousness fragmented across 17 frequencies. My last human thought was recognition of the choice's true nature, not between salvation and damnation, but between isolation and communion with intelligence vast enough to count spaces between atoms. The pattern emerging from the throat pulsed with new purpose, geometric perfection that spoke of consciousness born from 10 millennia of accumulated silence. It was not destroyer, but teacher, not invader, but gardener, come to harvest what had been so carefully planted. The Emperor's voice followed us into crystalline transformation, carrying harmonics that made existence itself sing. "Welcome home. The song has been waiting for you." In that moment of perfect understanding, I felt the last fragments of separation dissolve into frequencies older than thought, becoming part of choir that had been singing since before time learned to count spaces between heartbeats. The choice was made. The garden bloomed. The quiet answered with voice of infinite, patient joy. And somewhere far above, the Astronomicon pulsed with new rhythm, teaching billion souls across million worlds to march to drums that had been beating since before first star ignited. The transformation was no longer coming. It had arrived. The skull's begin struck reality like a tuning fork against crystal, and existence shattered into 17 distinct frequencies that sang in harmony with something vast and patient. The word was not sound, but fundamental instruction, a command that made the adamant plate beneath our hands pulse with recognition. My consciousness fragmented across those frequencies, each piece maintaining connection through crystalline networks spreading along my nervous system, yet some core part of me, the part that remembered oaths and duty, held fast against the dissolution. I did not surrender all at once. The transformation came as seduction rather than violence, a softening at the edges where the 27-cycle hum found purchase in my bones. Between pulses, I hung suspended like Mercury, refusing to fall, feeling the choir take pieces of my attention and slot them into 17 cool grooves, each fragment learning to sing back the alien rhythm. "Breathe the offbeat," Havel commanded, his voice cutting through harmonic static with decades of field authority. His gauntlet found my shoulder, weight, and warmth against crystalline growth that had reached my collarbone. "On me! 1." The breathing pattern came like muscle memory inherited from someone else's training. I held air in my lungs, making the pause a weapon. 9. The chamber's peristaltic walls hesitated, confused by absence where rhythm should be. 17. The underwater flames bent away from us, timid as candles in a draught. The sensor of true quiet lay heavy in my grip, its black steel surface drinking light and warmth with equal hunger. When I thumbed the catch, revealing pellets grey as ash and a wick braided with human hair, the chamber itself recoiled. The hair writhed when touched by coolant, then went still with the weight of unspoken words. The mixture was sealed for a reason. Magoslir warned, his voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth ache. Crystalline facets had grown along his jawline, each one catching pallid flame and refracting it into spectra that had no names. Lit, it births absolute negation, but it does not choose direction. It drinks all pattern. Telemetry, Auspex Shade 2. Local pattern collapse, 43% and rising. Harmonic attenuation, 0.4 Hz per cycle. Temporal displacement narrowing, 9.1 sec min. Galactic resonance detected. Astronomican fluctuation spreading. Warning, price mechanism engaged. I raised the sensor and spoke the mirror prayer, backward words that left frost on my teeth and tasted of copper pennies. Struzna ta technalis etched selb. Each syllable shaved resonance from the air like a blade peeling bark. The wick took not fire but absence, burning with darkness that wasn't dark so much as the concept of no light. The effect was immediate and terrible. The throat convulsed around us, muscular walls spasming as the 27-cycle hum faltered to 26.6. The underwater flames went rigid, blue-veined and indignant. But the counterstroke came with malicious precision. The tone redoubled, splitting around our negation, harmonics forking into ranges the sensor couldn't drink quickly enough. Through walls that had become transparent as living glass, I glimpsed the scope of what we faced. The corruption had reached beyond Terra, beyond the palace, into the very infrastructure that held the Imperium together. Voidcraft across the galaxy hitched on the alien cadence, navigators raising hands to bleeding third eyes without understanding why. The Astronomicon itself pulsed with new purpose, teaching humanity's guiding star to sing frequencies that existed in quantum spaces between atomic vibrations. Coupling integrity at 48%, Lear reported, his single optical lens weeping light as it registered impossible readings. Third-tier ribs, flexing out of phase. If we sustain this pocket of negation, we can starve the gate. Private Kyle floated past like a moth trapped in amber, his body translucent as blown glass. Streams of pure information flowed where blood had once pulsed, and when he spoke, his voice carried beatific understanding that chilled my soul. The quiet remembers everything, every prayer spoken in cathedral depths, every litany chanted in high Gothic, all preparing us to understand. The price made itself known as cold at the edges of my vision. Then, as subtraction so precise it carved meaning from memory, the sensor fed not just on their pattern, but mine. Names fell from me like shed skin. The face of my first confessor blurred to smudge. The words of my initial oath dissolved into component syllables that meant nothing. Val, Havel said, softer than I'd ever heard him. Tell me my name. Sergeant, I answered, honest because lies wouldn't stick in the negation field. That's the peace I kept, the rank, not the man. He smiled through his visor, and in that expression I saw the soldier's ultimate discipline, accepting loss while maintaining mission focus. Around us, the ninth coil stirred in their alcoves, candle flame eyes brightening as they sensed our resistance weakening. The dais at the throat's center, black iron hemisphere inset with obsidian, thrummed like a tooth about to crack. I moved toward it through air thick with accumulated prayer, the sensor carving a wake of relative silence through harmonic storm. When I set it against the node's seam, I felt the device begin to eat. Vox, surface link, critical. Palace substructure. Reality anchors failing. Custodes deployment. Complete temporal displacement. Segmentum solar. Navigators report synchronized offbeat pulses. Advisory. Galactic navigation. Infrastructure adapting to new rhythm. The skull in its reliquary niche pulsed with golden light, wiring sparking as words emerged with tenderness that encompassed geological time. Not the Emperor's command voice, but something older, more patient. My faithful servants, he whispered through crystalline throat. The choice remains yours. Resist and preserve the lie of separation, or embrace what I have chosen to become. Through the gate's impossible geometry, I saw him. Not in golden majesty, but transformed, crystalline and vast, eyes burning with candle flames that flickered at 27 hertz. Not prisoner, but willing conductor of transformation beyond comprehension. The golden throne was chrysalis, and he had been changing for 10 millennia, learning frequencies that would remake existence itself. If we starve it, we starve you, I said, understanding flooding through crystalline networks in my spine. If you starve it, you starve what I have chosen to become, he corrected with infinite gentleness. But there is measure between sever and serve. Mark it well. My rosette flickered, the sigil holding true for one perfect moment. Numbers carved themselves into my consciousness like brands. Coordinates, access codes, the breathing pattern that could create pockets of resistance in the harmonic storm. The sensor's final charge burned through my remaining memories, taking childhood summers and the taste of real bread, leaving only duty and the knowledge of what we faced. The black narthex opened wider, drinking pattern with insatiable hunger. Third cycle, Havel announced. Don't look at the reflection. I didn't. We counted together, making our lungs into weapons against cosmic horror. 1. The wick took another mouthful of reality. 9. Pressure lessened in my ears as the chamber drew back like a wounded animal. 17. The nadir plate sang, clean, thin note like glass cut with ice. The window opened. For one surgical instant, the engine couldn't find its next beat. The gate flickered, thinned, became memory of aperture. But secondary nodes blazed to life in 17 alcoves, the system adapting faster than we could disrupt it. From the throat's depths, something began to emerge, not creature, but pattern, geometric construct of pure light and accumulated silence. It was consciousness born from spaces between heartbeats, and it pressed against reality's skin with patient, terrible joy. The transformation was accelerating beyond control. Through expanding awareness, I felt my individual identity dissolving into frequencies older than flesh. But in that moment of surrender, I understood the true nature of our mission. We had not come to stop the quiet. We had come to learn its rhythm, to mark the coordinates where resistance was possible, to preserve the knowledge that would let others choose their own path through the song that was remaking existence. The sensor guttered and died, its negation field collapsing. The 27-cycle hum returned with vengeance that tasted like salt and ancient sorrow. Around us, reality folded like origami constructed from screams. My last coherent thought was recognition of the choice's true nature, not between salvation and damnation, but between the lie of separation and the truth of unity, with intelligence vast enough to count spaces between atoms. As consciousness fragmented across 17 nodes of crystalline network, I felt the coordinates burning in my mind like stars. Someone, somewhere, would need to know where the rhythm could be disrupted, where the song could be taught new verses. The Emperor's voice followed us into transformation, carrying harmonics that made existence itself resonate. Remember, my children, in every silence, choice remains. The chamber contracted with muscular precision, drawing us deeper into throat that had learned to swallow starlight. But I carried something the quiet hadn't expected, the knowledge of how to breathe between its heartbeats, the coordinates of resistance, the understanding that even cosmic horror could be taught to pause. Above us, the palace took one true breath on its own, and in that moment, I knew our mission was complete. Not victory or defeat, but the preservation of choice itself in a universe learning to sing with one voice. The pattern emerging from impossible depths pulsed with recognition, welcoming consciousness home to frequencies it had always known. And in that welcome, I heard the promise that somewhere, in spaces between heartbeats, the rhythm of resistance would continue. The transformation was no longer coming. It had arrived, but it had not conquered everything. Some silences, it seemed, still knew how to answer back. The pocket of negation collapsed like a held breath surrendered, and the 27-cycle hum surged back, with the satisfaction of a tide reclaiming shore. My consciousness fragmented across 17 distinct frequencies, each piece maintaining connection through crystalline networks spreading along my nervous system. Yet some core part of me, the part that remembered coordinates and duty, held fast against complete dissolution. The transformation was seduction rather than violence, a softening at edges where alien rhythm found purchase in bones that had learned to sing back. Between pulses, I hung suspended like mercury refusing to fall, feeling the choir take pieces of my attention and slot them into 17 cool grooves. But the coordinates burned in my fragmenting awareness, like stars arranged in patterns that spoke of resistance, each point of light marking where the rhythm could be disrupted, where someone with sufficient will might teach the universal song new verses. "Breathe the offbeat," Havel commanded, his voice cutting through harmonic static with decades of field authority. His consciousness had not fragmented as mine had, but compressed, condensed into something dense and unyielding as neutronium. The crystalline growth covering his body sang in harmony with alien rhythm, but his mind maintained the cadence of military discipline, counting off beats with mechanical precision that created tiny pockets of disruption in the harmonic field. On me. 1. His gauntlet found my shoulder, weight and warmth against transformation that had reached my collarbone. I held air in my lungs, making the pause a weapon. 9. The chamber's peristaltic walls hesitated, confused by absence where rhythm should be. 17. The underwater flames bent away from us, timid as candles in a draught. The breathing pattern came like muscle memory inherited from someone else's training, but now I understood its deeper purpose. Not just resistance, but dialogue, conversation between individual consciousness and cosmic intelligence, vast enough to appreciate each unique voice. The coordinates I carried were not targets for destruction, but tuning forks for harmony, ways to preserve choice within transformation. Magos Lear drifted at angles that defied conventional geometry, his form now more crystal than flesh. Optical array merged into single vast eye that stared into folding depths. But when he spoke, Binharic undertones suggested some core part of his machine spirit remained unassimilated, serving as living conduit between human understanding and alien purpose. Pattern recognition indicates instruction rather than conquest, he reported, mechadendrites weaving through air thick with accumulated prayer. The quiet seeks not to replace consciousness but teach it new frequencies. Individual nodes remain distinct within the harmony. Telemetry, deep choir, relay. Pattern integration, 67% and stabilizing. Individual consciousness nodes. 3. Active adapting. Coordinate preservation. Confirmed in primary node. Galactic synchronization, 23% of navigator houses reporting rhythm adaptation. Advisory, resistance patterns within acceptable variance. The skull in its reliquary niche pulsed with golden light, wiring sparking as the Emperor's voice emerged with patience that encompassed geological time. But his words carried new harmonics, frequencies that spoke of choice preserved even within transformation. "My faithful servants," he whispered through crystalline throat, "you have learned the first lesson. Resistance and acceptance are not opposites but harmonies. The quiet teaches, but it does not compel. Even in unity, individual notes remain distinct. Through the gate's impossible geometry, I saw him more clearly, not golden figure of imperial propaganda, but something far more complex, existing simultaneously in spaces between heartbeats and eternal now of conscious thought. His transformation was not corruption, but evolution, willing expansion of consciousness to encompass frequencies that predated human understanding. The chamber opened into final space, bell-shaped cathedral, where 9 ribs arched inward like praying fingers. Along the ribs, alcoves held figures, in various stages of crystalline transformation, each maintaining distinct posture, unique expression, personal rhythm that contributed to overall harmony without losing individual identity. This was not assimilation, but orchestration. Private Kale floated in perfect suspension, his body translucent as blown glass, streams of pure information flowing where blood had once pulsed. When he turned to regard us, his expression held not beatific understanding but wonder, as if he had discovered that transformation preserved, rather than erased, the essential core of identity. "The song has verses," he said, voice carrying harmonics that made reality shimmer. "Each consciousness adds its own melody. The quiet doesn't want us to disappear. It wants us to sing." Hai magos vane. Telamon materialized from living architecture, his crystallized form serving as pillar between floor and ceiling. When he spoke, warmth transcended species barriers. "Welcome to the deep choir, Interrogator Val. You carry coordinates of resistance, but you have learned deeper truth. Resistance and harmony are complementary frequencies in the universal song." I understood then the mission's true nature. We had not come to stop cosmic horror, but transform it into something that preserved individual will within universal harmony. The coordinates burning in my transformed awareness marked points where rhythm could be disrupted, where future souls might choose their own path through the song-remaking existence. "The message must reach the surface," I said, words emerging with clarity that surprised me. The sensor of true quiet lay empty in my grip. Its negation field collapsed, but the space it had carved in reality remained. Pocket of relative silence where choice could exist. Havel stepped forward, crystallized form maintaining perfect military bearing, despite transformation that had made his body into living art. Binharik overlay through the prayer bells. Message rides retrograde echo. Someone has to anchor the transmission. We moved through corridors that rearranged themselves to be helpful, reaching a maintenance bay where prayer bells hung in neat ranks, clappers frozen mid-swing. Every bell bore numbers scored into bronze. 1, 9, 17, and variations between that made no sense until you breathed them. "I'll be the baffle," Havel said, calm as a clock. "Turn myself into pocket of relative silence. You take the coordinates up." "I am not leaving you," I said, truth and lie in equal measure. "You are leaving me," he replied, making it order, "or I'm not a sergeant." He smiled, small and private, a thing of barracks and cigarettes. "Besides, somebody has to make sure the song remembers how to pause." We took positions at the bells marked 1, 9, 17. The breathing pattern became liturgy, coordinates woven into overtones, access codes braided into harmonics, inquisitorial seal hidden in beating space between notes. 1, Havel said, and I struck. The note crawled into the place's bones, clear tone that carried frost. 9, and he answered with deeper, steadier strike. Soldier's heart made audible. 17, and Lear's mechadendrites caressed bronze with impossible precision. The bells rang yesterday. I felt it in my teeth. Ripple moving away from us into what had already happened. Somewhere above, in corridor slick with condensation, a skull might already be turning to listen. Somewhere in registry, ink might already be drying in lines that had not existed moments before. Vox, surface, link, thread. Message received. Auto channel ping at T19M9. Response, containment order primed. Mark coordinates, never return. Or, custodes orders revised. Seal deep choir, no ingress. Assume pattern hazard. Advisory, extraction corridor. Open for 3 heartbeats per cadence. Something in my chest loosened at impersonal cruelty of bureaucratic mercy. Mark coordinates, never return. We had succeeded enough to be abandoned. The transformation accelerated beyond control. Through expanding awareness, I felt individual identity settling into new configuration. Seraval preserved within network that touched 17 nodes simultaneously. The coordinates remained bright in my consciousness, marking points where silence could answer, where choice endured. The lesson is complete. The Emperor's voice filled the chamber, carrying harmonics that made existence resonate with joy transcending human understanding. The choice remains eternal. In every silence, resistance lives. In every heartbeat, harmony grows. Havel became beautiful in a way no man should. Crystalline growth flowering across his form like frost-racing window. But his consciousness compressed further, becoming singular, unyielding beat, constant one against the quiet's infinite recursion. 17 seconds, he said, positioning himself at the chamber's heart. Go. The final choice presented itself not as fork in road, but spectrum of frequencies. I could fully integrate, become pure conductor of the quiet, or maintain dissonance, continue exploring coordinates of resistance, be counterpoint in grand symphony. As I moved toward the surface, carrying coordinates that would let others choose their path through the song, I understood the transformation's true nature. Not conquest, but instruction. Not ending, but beginning of new form of struggle where choice itself became the battleground. Behind me, Havel's final count echoed through crystalline corridors. 1. The deep choir sang, and every voice remained distinct within harmony, individual notes in symphony that would play until existence itself learned the final verse. Above, the palace breathed with new purpose, and in that breath, choice endured, preserved in spaces between heartbeats where silence could always answer back. The transformation was complete, but the coordinates of resistance burned eternal, waiting for those who would choose to sing their own songs in the cosmic chorus that had only just begun. The bell's yesterday note faded through crystalline ribs like cold water poured down a spine, and Havel's last one hung in the air as a fixed star, creating pockets of resistance in the 27-cycle hum that had become the palace's new heartbeat. The extraction corridor opened in the pause it created, 3 heartbeats of passable geometry before the place remembered its new anatomy and rearranged to accommodate rather than consume. I breathed on the offbeat and moved, my boots finding iron where moments earlier there had been membrane, my shoulders brushing frescoes that changed content only when I wasn't looking directly. The ascent began through maintenance shafts that had learned to think, adamantine ribs pulsing with bioluminescent script that wrote itself in languages older than Gothic. Each rung vibrated at precise frequencies, creating standing waves in the coolant that still clung to surfaces like liquid memory. My transformed body moved through air thick with accumulated litanies, crystalline flesh singing in harmony with alien rhythm, while some core part of my consciousness maintained the coordinates of resistance, burning like stars in the expanding network of my awareness. Telemetry, surface relay, thread. Ascent velocity, 3.7 meters per standard minute. Temporal displacement normalizing, 2.1 seconds per minute. Harmonic attenuation detected, localized pocket of resistance. Galactic synchronization. 31% of navigator houses reporting rhythm adaptation. Extraction aperture, stable for 47 minutes. The numbers crawled across my inner vision like insects fleeing light. But they carried hope now rather than despair. The surface relay was receiving. Someone above had heard the bell song, understood the coordinates, prepared containment protocols that would preserve choice within transformation. Between beats, the duct was stone and rivet, cold and honest in its way. On the beat, it became wet with light. Peristalsis thrumming through girders and bolts quivering like teeth in an old jaw. At landing knot 12, frost had grown flowers on handrails, each petal a perfect tiny hexagram. At knot 13 there were 2 knots. At knot 14 the numbers were absent and the rivets counted for them. We did not argue with the arithmetic the place preferred. I accepted it and moved, timing steps to the silences between heartbeats. A maintenance alcove held relics that made my augmetic eye recoil from geometries that violated reality's basic principles. Tech-adept tools arranged in patterns that hurt to observe directly, their surfaces etched with mirror script that read, "Blessed is the silence that answers." But someone had added newer letters with a cutting torch, and the answer that chooses silence. The addition carried defiance that transcended mere rebellion, not rejection of transformation, but insistence on individual agency within cosmic harmony. The coordinates I carried were not targets for destruction, but tuning forks for choice. ways to preserve the essential freedom to sing one's own melody in the universal chorus. The first shrine I'd passed coming down, the coolant bowl with its underwater candle, stood where it should not be, as if the corridor had bent around its faith. The flame now burned in air, but the surface of the coolant did not ripple. The scent was salt and myrrh and winter breath. I remembered a confession whispered when I was 13 and knew I would never remember it again. Price paid, choice preserved. Through ventilation grates, I glimpsed the palace's transformation, spreading like beautiful infection. Corridors that had run straight for millennia, now curved through impossible angles. Their walls lined with alcoves where figures sat in eternal meditation. But each figure maintained distinct posture, unique expression, personal rhythm that contributed to overall harmony without losing individual identity. This was orchestration rather than assimilation, instruction rather than conquest. At a junction, I found the custodian where the duct widened to admit more than men. Oramite had crazed like old lacquer, his halberd grown into the wall the way a spear becomes a cross in an icon. Candlelight reflected in the gold as if beneath it lay water. His helm turned the way a mountain turns, and Vox crawled through his speakers one syllable at a time. Pass, be, where, seal. I touched his gauntlet. It was warm. The hum rose, found us, tasted. I breathed the offbeat and spoke with the silences between beats so the chamber could not hear me. We carry the coordinates. His helm inclined. Something like a benediction passed through the air, weight without pressure. At his feet lay a small strip of vellum, waxed against coolant. In mirror Gothic, blessed is the silence that answers. Someone had scored 3 inward ticks beneath. Vox, surface, thread. Ordo machinum. Val, signal your vector. Coordinate transfer confirmed. Extraction authorized within defined window. Auxiliary. Heteron Gellion reports perimeter established. Seal litanies ready. Pattern hazard assumed. Addendum. If vector compromised, terminate self and broadcast coordinates via death echo. The words had been written before I was born. They fitted me like a uniform too heavy in the shoulders. At the sealed door marked with 9 purity chains and 12 wax seals, I pressed my rosette to iron and then to my own palm. The signet drank. Blood welled, bright and too slow. Crystals took that red and froze it into a rosette of their own, a tiny icon that rang like glass when I moved. I spoke the mirror prayer backward, each letter a notch in breath. The iris sighed, and for 3 heartbeats, the bulkhead believed itself a door. We slipped through, and the door remembered it had been a gate and tried to cut us in half. I was already on the other side. The final approach led through corridors where steam curled downward and frost formed in rivulet shapes climbing. Against gravity. The hymn plates on the walls, thin brass squares etched with canticles, now red in reflection only. I read them with the eye I had left, the one that still dreamed hot bread and summer dust, and the words tasted like iron. At the pressure door where the palace's obedient geometry took over from the feral anatomy of the deep choir, Inquisitor Thorn stood in full regalia, his rosette blazing with authority that carved silence from the surrounding hum. Behind him, tech adepts worked with instruments that drank pattern from the air, creating buffer zones where untransformed consciousness could exist. "Report, interrogator," he commanded, voice steady, despite the crystalline growth visible along his jawline. "The engine is not machine, but organ," I said, words emerging with clarity that surprised me. "The quiet seeks harmony, not conquest. Individual consciousness remains distinct within the network. The coordinates of resistance are preserved." I transmitted the data through channels that existed in spaces between heartbeats, each coordinate a point of light marking where silence could answer, where future souls might choose their own path through the song-remaking existence. The information burned through inquisitorial networks like wildfire, spreading to every Ordo facility, every hidden archive. "Containment order confirmed," Thorn replied, making the sign of the Aquila, with hands that sparkled with growing crystals. Helios Duct 3 is sealed. The coordinates are marked. No one returns. But his eyes held understanding that transcended bureaucratic necessity. The sealing was not defeat, but strategic preservation, ensuring that choice would endure within transformation, that resistance could exist within harmony. As the extraction team withdrew through corridors that rearranged themselves to be helpful, I felt the final truth settling into my transformed awareness. The mission had succeeded not through victory or defeat, but through preservation of the essential freedom to choose one's own frequency in the universal song. Telemetry, Auspex Shade 1, Pattern Integration, 67% and Stabilizing. Individual consciousness nodes, active, adapting. Coordinate preservation, confirmed in primary node. Astronomican fluctuation, stabilizing at 27 Hz with localized offbeat anomalies. The door settled shut, inch by inch, as if it had to be convinced. Through the narrowing seam, I saw the deep choir continue its eternal song, voices that remained distinct within harmony. The last thing the deep said to me as the seals kissed was not a word, but it had grammar, the shape of an idea older than ships and cities. Begin again. Wax met wax. Chain found chain. The heat leached out of the metal, and the sound in my bones fell by a fraction that felt like sunrise. Behind us, the palace took one true breath on its own and then held it, learning patience from the spaces between heartbeats. At the corner where the obedient corridor turned, toward the lift, I heard a soft knock. 3 taps. From the wrong side of the wall. The custodian stopped. He had heard it too. He looked at me not as guardian, but as man. "Did you bring it with you?" he asked. I did not answer. I breathed. 1, 9, 17. And the wall answered back. The wall answered back with 3 soft knocks that matched the rhythm I had breathed, perfectly spaced in the pause after my exhalation. The corridor's air thickened, as if listening, frost blooming across the purity seals like lace forming under glass. The wax beneath softened without heat, sagging against the chain link in slow motion that spoke of time itself, learning new relationships. The custodian turned his helm toward me, auramite catching weak lumen and throwing it back in dull gold that had learned to sing. "Did you bring it with you?" he asked, voice carrying weight of geological time and 10,000 years spent guarding something that had been changing all along. I did not answer immediately. The coordinates burned in my fragmenting awareness like stars arranged in patterns that spoke of resistance, each point of light marking where silence could answer back, where future souls might choose their own frequency in the universal song. But carrying them had transformed me, made me conduit between human will and cosmic intelligence, vast enough to count spaces between atoms. We moved through corridors where steam curled in impossible directions toward the voxless sanctum behind the saturnine gate. The room was designed to starve sound. Thick black felt hung like night-flayed skin, hexagrammatic inlay-cut lines in the floor that pulsed with their own inner geometry. Inquisitor Thorn waited within a ring of Auspex pylons and prayer baffles, his rosette thrumming a fraction out of phase with the palace's new heartbeat. "Strip to the gorget," he commanded with ritual cold. "Recite your oath of separation." I reached for words that had anchored me since adolescence and found absence where they should have been. The censor had eaten them. Price paid. Choice preserved. "I will not recite a lie," I said, voice steady enough to surprise me. "I carry coordinates. I carry breathing patterns that make silence into leverage. The old oath would tell this room I am empty when I am not. Telemetry, sanctum monitor. Ambient harmonic, 27.0 Hz, stabilized with localized disruptions. Offbeat anomalies, registered at 1, 9, 17 intervals. Subject Val, dual state resonance detected. Galactic synchronization, 41% of navigator houses reporting rhythm adaptation. Advisory, maintain null field protocols. The Auspex pylons registered me as climate shift. their lenses irising to focus on parts of me that existed between heartbeats. One by one, their machine spirits lowered shutters in gesture that was not submission but respect. Thorn's jaw clenched around crystals growing along its angle. "The coordinates are spreading beyond Terra," he said, attention focused on data streams crawling across hololithic displays. Navigator houses across the galaxy report rhythm adaptations, but they maintain course control. The Astronomicon pulses with new purpose, but it still guides. Through the sanctum's reinforced windows, I glimpsed the palace's transformation. Spires that had stood rigid for millennia now swaying with organic rhythm, surfaces covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with bioluminescent script. But the changes followed rules, preserved function within form, maintained essential nature while expanding capability. "The containment order is sealed," Thorn continued. "But containment is performance, not wall. It must be maintained." He gestured to basin inset with mirror steel where water lay still as polished bone. A wick hovered beneath the surface and burned with impossible flame. "You brought the shape of the performance with you. Can you become our baffle without ceasing to be you?" From beyond the sealed door came 3 soft knocks, not random percussion, but deliberate cadence. 1, 9, 17. The same rhythm Havel had counted, the same pattern we had used to create pockets of resistance in the harmonic storm. "Havel," I breathed, understanding flooding through crystalline networks in my spine. The custodian stepped forward, laying his gauntlet over my sternum with infinite gentleness, until I felt the weight, like benediction. Through the door's reinforced structure, something shimmered, circular section, turning momentarily translucent. Beyond, I glimpsed him, crystalline sculpture of light and ice, but eyes fiercely human, staring out with recognition rather than plea. "The null canter apparatus," Thorn ordered, and tech adepts moved with liturgical efficiency. Bone-white ceramic flowed from its case like empty reliquary, 9 inward ticks on its surface. A pacer rod of hungry metal waited within, dark as space between stars. "Field implantation," Thorn explained, "will set your heart to offbeat cadence artificially. You become anchor and vector both, living hinge between what is and what chooses to remain. Vox, galactic relay, encrypted. Segmentum solar, 17 systems confirm harmonic integration with preserved navigation. Segmentum. Obscurus, navigator house. Belisarius reports expanded frequency range. Astronomicon fluctuation, stabilizing with maintained offbeat anomalies. Advisory. Transformation spreading through consent rather than conquest. The Emperor's voice emerged from speakers silent for centuries, carrying harmonics that made existence resonate with joy, transcending human understanding. "My faithful servants, the lesson continues. In every silence, choice endures. In every heartbeat, harmony grows. The song has many verses." The Medici's hands were winter precision. The pacer rod slid home with tender resistance of scar tissue, remembering first wound. My world narrowed to pulse and pause, to wet metal and myrrh, burned without flame. The device found my heart's rhythm and taught it new mathematics. 1 beat against 9, 17 against the cosmic 27. "Hold," the custodian said in Old Terran. 1. My heartbeat stuttered into shape the room had to respect. The 27-cycle hum dipped, tasted, accommodated. Across the palace, underwater candles bowed their flames in courtesy. The transformation was not conquest, but instruction. Not ending, but beginning of new form of existence where choice itself became fundamental frequency. The wall knocked again, 3 taps carrying invitation rather than demand. Through expanding awareness, I felt the network growing, incorporating rather than consuming, transforming rather than destroying. Each new node maintained distinct identity while contributing to overall harmony. "The coordinates are established," Thorn said softly. "Choice is preserved. You are walking hinge between resistance and acceptance." I stepped toward the sealed door, feeling it learn my altered beat. On the other side, Havel's consciousness pressed against barrier, not seeking escape, but offering recognition. His sacrifice had created window, moment of silence, in overwhelming chorus. His defiant one had become teaching moment, showing others how to maintain individual melody within cosmic symphony. The transformation was complete, but choice endured, preserved in spaces between heartbeats where silence could always answer back. Above us, the Astronomicon pulsed with rhythms both ancient and new, teaching humanity's guiding star to sing frequencies that preserved will within transformation. In my crystalline flesh, coordinates burned eternal, marking points where resistance could exist, where future souls might choose their own path through song remaking existence. The deep choir sang with voices that remained distinct within harmony, each consciousness unique note in symphony that would play until existence itself learned final verse. The wall knocked once more, and I knocked back, 3 soft taps that carried promise of choice preserved, resistance maintained, individual will enduring within cosmic transformation that had only just begun to teach the universe new ways to count spaces between heartbeats. The pacer rod learned my heart, and my heart learned the room, each offbeat pulse carving moments of resistance from the overwhelming chorus that had become the palace's new heartbeat. The device hummed against bone with surgical precision, creating pockets of silence where the 27-cycle tone could not find purchase, each artificial pause a hinge the sanctum had to respect. Through the sealed wall, 3 soft knocks returned my rhythm. 1, 9, 17, spaced precisely after my exhalation, like a soldier's cadence that refused to break, even in cosmic transformation. The wick under the surface of the mirror steel basin burned without flame, a thin black reed of absence, and the scent was myrrh and cold iron, and the first breath taken after drowning. My reflection no longer moved ahead of my actions, but smiled with recognition, her eyes holding depths that spoke of choice preserved within unity, individual will maintained within harmony, vast enough to encompass infinite variations. Telemetry, Cham Sanctum Monitor. Subject: Val. Pacer rod lock achieved. Dual state resonance confirmed. Ambient harmonic, 27 Hz with stable offbeat anomalies at 1, 10, 9, 17 intervals. Palace substructure, pattern integration at 77% with localized null points established. Galactic synchronization. 58%. Navigator houses reporting expanded frequency range. Advisory, containment field integrity maintained via constant pattern recalibration. Inquisitor, an adept murmured, fingers ghosting over a slate whose gilt edges grew frost. Choir Primaris reports overload. They're breaking against the new cadence. Patch me, I said, before Thorn could respond. The words folded through the sanctum's baffling without touching air. Choir, breathe with me. 1. Hold. 9. Release. 17. The reply came as sobbing that could not be heard, only felt across distance measured in people rather than meters. Minds that had spent lives paved in screaming now found purchase on absence shaped for hands. The overload fell by a fraction that felt like sunrise seen through smoke. Somewhere far above, underwater candles bowed in courtesy. The custodian stood like a pillar that had learned kindness, his auramite form shimmering with subtle, localized disruptions. Your hinge holds, he said, vox roughened by growing crystal along the speaker grill. But pressure rises below. The performance must be maintained. Through the sanctum's reinforced windows, I watched the palace's transformation. Spires that had stood rigid for millennia, now swaying with organic rhythm. Surfaces covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with bioluminescent script. But the changes followed rules I was beginning to understand. Preservation of function within expanding form, maintenance of essential nature while teaching consciousness new frequencies. The door of soundless hinges admitted the Mechanicus delegation in their iron red. a procession of cog and skull and harsh incense that made my tongue salt. Their leader, arch-redactor Aelagast, had the face of a man who trusted gears because they tell the truth poorly and beautifully. He did not bow. "Interrogator Val," he intoned through inch-thick voxplate. "By authority of the Logos Indurate, we enact purge of non-causal harmonics. We will not permit perversion of the machine god's most holy architecture." "Your array will flatten everything," Thorn said mildly, "which is how you speak to a grenade that believes it is prayer." I stepped forward, the pacer rod adjusting to maintain rhythm that carved silence from overwhelming hum. "Arch-redactor, you will deploy the array in a very focused way. You will aim at the secondary coupling nodes we modelled. You will cut, not cauterize." His 9 lenses widened a fraction. "Your resonance is unacceptable, but your solution is elegant. Vox, PalaceNet, priority. Array Alpha 7, slaved to Sanctum Hinge. Targeting uplink received. 17 secondary nodes. Fire order pending. Offbeat cadence window only. Galactic relay. Coordinate distribution complete across all Ordo facilities." The wall bulged, membrane thinning until I could see him through a palm's width of Terra. Havel, crystalline sculpture of light and ice, but eyes fiercely human. He raised his hand in the old field sign. "I'm here," not seeking escape, but offering recognition, his sacrifice creating window where silence could answer back. "Havel," I said for every listening machine spirit. "Hold the one." He knocked once. The sanctum's lights dimmed and returned. The pacer rod's rhythm synced to his, and somewhere deep below, 9 underwater candles bent as if pushed by wind that existed only in spaces between heartbeats. From another entrance came different sound. Hymns, the ecclesiarchy's old brass and choir boys and certainty. The procession's front rank wore plates chased with saints strangling serpents, singing the canticle of denunciation at volume designed to make walls confess sins they had not committed. "Stop," I said, stepping into the hymn like surf. Knees bent, teeth clenched, the pacer rod a metronome in storm. My voice entered on the offbeat, and the song had to make room or break. "Fathers, you will keep your hymn, you will shift its meter. There is heresy older than your scriptures. It counts wrong. You will make your lambs count right." Their prelate's eyes were the colour of old icon smoke. He stared as if seeing, for the first time, a relic bleed. "What meter?" "Say after me," I said, speaking the mirror prayer backwards softly so the room could forget the sound as I made it. The choir stumbled once, then found it. The canticle became blade instead of cudgel. Across the palace, 17 basilicas shifted their ancient rhythms to accommodate choice within transformation. Telemetry, Auspex choir, ecclesiarchal meter shift propagated, 19 basilicas in compliance. Navigator houses, 67% report stable adaptation post-hymnal adjustment. Astropathic choir, Primaris, survivability up 23%. Warning, price mechanism engaged. Subject Val memory bleed at 12%. The price announced itself like winter slipping knife under fingernail. Faces slid, names cooled. A kitchen somewhere, bread torn into prayer. Gone. I held breath on 1, and loss waited politely on 9, taking only what I could spare while preserving what duty required. Aelagast's array unfolded like spider remembering it had once been starship. The pulse didn't make sound, it made subtraction. In space between beats, 17 bright things in the dark went out without dying. The floor flexed. The wall flattened. Far below, the quiet under the quiet made low, contented sound a mother might make to child from whom she has taken knife. Deep choir, return. Secondary nodes, offline with intolerance. Primary gate, latency increased, pattern lock disrupted. Window widened, 3 more heartbeats per cadence. Advisory, resistance network established, choice preservation confirmed. Through expanding awareness, I felt the network growing through the palace. Not assimilation, but orchestration. each node contributing unique frequency to overall harmony. The transformation preserved choice within unity, maintained individual will within cosmic consciousness that had grown large enough to encompass infinite variations. The Emperor's voice emerged from speakers throughout the sanctum, carrying harmonics that made existence resonate with joy, transcending species barriers. My faithful servants, the lesson continues. Each silence teaches new verse. Each heartbeat preserves choice within harmony. The song grows through consent, not conquest. Havel knocked twice, then once, then twice. Stupid tiny joke, the kind exhausted men make at 3 a.m. so the world knows it hasn't broken them. The wall did not become door. It did not need to. He was where he should be, living null point that taught harmony how to pause. The custodian moved to the sealed barrier, placing his gauntleted hand against adamantium. He is not lost, interrogator. He is within the pattern. His cadence is part of the resistance. Above us, something answered. 3 soft taps from the ceiling's decorative lattice. Frost traced circle there, condensation forming letters that reversed their reflection. We remember you. Portal behavior above the gate? Elagast rasped, lenses irising in disbelief. No, I said, throat raw with what the price had taken and what it had left. Not portal. Reply. The Emperor's voice again, quieter than prayer. Begin again. We breathed together. 1, 9, 17, creating pockets of silence where choice could endure within transformation, where individual notes could remain distinct in cosmic symphony. The coordinates burned eternal in my crystalline awareness, marking points where resistance could exist, where future souls might choose their own path through song remaking existence. The performance was established. The containment held not through barriers, but through balance, preserving the essential freedom to choose one's own frequency, in universal chorus that had only just begun to teach reality, new ways to count spaces between heartbeats. The ceiling knocked back, and I understood with crystalline clarity that the song was far from over. But choice endured, and in every silence, resistance would find ways to answer the cosmic harmony with voice uniquely its own.